It's time for more Vince McMahon talk, because when it comes to the life of one Vincent Kennedy McMahon, there's so much left to say, so much left to say, so much we don't know, we can't cover it all, so much left to say, so much left to say, let's just fucking get to it already. I'm John Rentham with my real honest thoughts on the good, the bad, and the Vince Part 3. So, it's been a minute since I did one of these. I do apologize for the delay. I've been very busy covering the G1, working a whole lot, and dealing with the heat. And also, just time got away from me, because time is a flat circle like sand through the hourglass. These are the days of our thighs. Sand gained in the thighs. Ouch. Anyway, when I last left this series off, we were in 1992, but I want to go back a little bit. Not back to the beginning, because that would be pointless since I already covered that, but to Saturday night's main event, because that's one thing that I don't think truly gets talked about enough. Just how influential and how great Saturday night's main event was as far as bringing wrestling to the masses. Now, yes, you had Mid-South Wrestling with its great television coverage, Jim Crockett Promotions with great syndicated television coverage, Vern Gagne and the AWA had a ton of television coverage, and even when Saturday night's main event started, because Vince McMahon was friends with Dick Ebersol, who worked with NBC, these were quarterly specials. They were big fucking deals, and actually they even increased them at some points. Like, there were some times where a lot of these specials were being done. They weren't always live, but they felt big, and they got big ratings. Like, you think about many of the moments that happened. Like, the fact that they got on NBC was a big fucking deal. And, you know, he's on USA for a short time. He was on Turner Network. That's been covered with the Black Saturday part, and, you know, talking about all that shit and everything. A lot of deep diving could be done in that, you know, for people that, or from people rather, that are more historians than I am. I'm just a fan that has studied this stuff, and I just want to give my opinions, hence why I'm doing these parts, and I'm probably going to end up being at least part 5 or 6 before we get anywhere near the end at this point. But Saturday night's main event, big fucking deal. Had to give a shout to that, and you think about the fact that, you know, many iconic TV matches have big moments, like the fact that Wrestlemania got launched. You had the Wrestling Classic, which wasn't so great. If you look back on the Wrestling Classic, it wasn't very good. But given the fact that Vince was swallowing up so much goddamn talent, and maybe I shouldn't have put Vince McMahon and swallowing in the same goddamn sentence, given all the shit that keeps coming out about him, but nevertheless, at this time, there was a lot of great shit happening. Everything was just rolling in the proper direction for Vince. Everything worked out so well for him. And all the stuff that he had, you know, gotten lucky with, and all the people that he had run out of business and raided their talents, now he was able to take over this network. And even though, sure, there were some ratings that were a little bit lower, and by 1992, they were going to be at the last Saturday night's main event. That was November 14th, 1992. Talking about, like, the big one, you know, the main event. And they had a few others called the main event, but the big one, of course, Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan in the rematch, the double headers. How much did they pay for the plastic surgery? There we go. That was like a cemented moment where, for better or worse, that's something that WWE will be remembered for. And being on NBC was a big fucking deal. And even after that, they had some great moments. Before that, the Mega Powers had formed. And on that same deal, they had Honky Tonk Man and Randy Savage. Randy Savage, by the way, a better Intercontinental Champion than Honky Tonk Man by a fucking landslide. It's a shame that Randy Savage is no longer with us, because he was so influential and so tremendous in the ring and just such a personality. I miss Randy Savage to this day. Randy Savage, by the way, always better than Hulk Hogan. But it would take an entire video to list all the moments that happened on Saturday night's main event, but it was just really such a big fucking deal. But then by 1990 had some moments, 1991, but then things started to really go down. Like, you know, they were switching time slots. By the time we got to 1992, we had the seismic shift. We had WrestleMania 8, where Hulk Hogan took on Sid Justice, and that was going to be Hulk Hogan's last match. And because the steroid trial was going on, a big goddamn deal where Vince McMahon may have possibly gone to jail. Jerry Jarrett was even brought in. That's why Jerry Lawler was brought up. That's why the USWA and WWF at the time had a partnership. And you think about that WrestleMania, something didn't quite coagulate. Like, there was some good stuff on it, And it also felt like a weird transitional period. And also people were having difficulty getting into the venue because they didn't plan that shit at all. And it was in the Hoosier Dome, which is a big, big fucking venue. But anyway, WrestleMania 8, you had Piper versus Bret, which to me was way more memorable for the right reasons as opposed to Hogan and Sid Justice for the wrong reasons. And then you had Randy Savage versus Ric Flair. Both matches had their hard way blading, but they passed it off better in Piper versus Bret, where you could just see Flair doing all that he was doing. But Vince McMahon at this point was getting a little bit worried because everybody's going to be noticeably smaller, taking the steroids out, all that, because of the doctor that had blown the whistle on Vince McMahon's operation. Even though Vince, for all the faults that he has, and believe me, he has a lot of them, we're finding out more about them as time goes on, he did not hand steroids to people. Was it encouraged? Probably, because a lot of promoters would have encouraged that in the 80s, because it's like, one, you get bigger, we get more attention, and also, yeah, you're fucking up your body, but we aren't going to know that for a number of years. So, WrestleMania 8. Big goddamn deal. Hogan leaves, and Sid actually leaves soon after that, I believe for failing the drug test. Ultimate Warrior had made his return, by the way. Fuck the Ultimate Warrior, I'm glad he's dead. That ended up flaming out, because he had that feud with Papa Shango. And then we go to SummerSlam 1992, where Vince, it was on tape delay, so it affected the buy rates in the States a little bit, but it was a big deal of 70, 80,000 UK fans, whatever the fuck it was, they were going nuts. What was a big deal is normally Vince McMahon would have put Savage and Warrior in the main event. However, he went with Bulldog and Bret, family drama, family dynamic, in the main event, Workhorse Championship, Intercontinental title. That showed where, hey, Bret can draw. Bulldog, unfortunately, had been up for about 2 fucking days because he was partying with the late great Jim Neidhart, and that's also the late great British Bulldog. No doubt, 2 very talented individuals. When Bulldog was motivated, he was fucking great. When Neidhart was in tag teams, he was hitting a lot better. Because by the early to mid-90s, it was very obvious that years of bumps and everything and traveling the road had taken their toll. But he was always great in tag teams. Now, we talk about, a little bit more about SummerSlam 92. It was a big deal in the UK. Bret loses, but he gets launched. Flair wins the championship from Savage just a little bit after that, after Savage is selling his knee, and then Bret beats Flair at a house show in Saskatoon, I believe, and that was an example of Vince having to go more with people that weren't going to get popped, but also people they could trust, and he could trust Bret. Bret was very trustworthy as far as a champion. He wasn't going to show up messed up. He was going to do great shit as champion, and he did. He had classic matches. Bret is my favorite wrestler of all time. That's not very likely to change. If it was not for Bret Hart, I probably would have not stayed watching WWE. As bad as WCW got in like the Jim Herd era, because fuck Jim Herd, the fact that he's still alive is a goddamn abomination. If it wasn't for Bret and Randy to an extent, but Randy by this point was a part-timer. He was a commentator / wrestler and would start as a commentator when they started WWE Raw just soon after this. Bret was a great centerpiece, the great champion. Had that match with Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series 92. They had the last Saturday night's main event on November 14th, 1992, where Shawn had beaten Davey, and that should have launched Davey. That SummerSlam 92 win should have launched Davey. Unfortunately, him and Ultimate Warrior got popped for HGH or steroids or something like that, whatever the fuck it was, from some doctor in the UK. And Vince was like, you're done. You got to go. Bulldog went to WCW. Warrior made a few appearances, started Warrior University, because who wouldn't want to learn from a guy that was once quoted as saying, queering doesn't make the world work? Fuck him, fuck his goddamn stupid twat wife. Hopefully his kids grow up to be better than he was. So anyway, 1992 comes to a close, and WWE Raw starts in the Manhattan Center, and at first it is live. It's a big deal. It's an intimate venue. And on the first show, Shawn and Taker, and then it was kind of cool on the 25th anniversary how both did appear. That was a big goddamn deal. That really was. Bret was on there. Of course, Undertaker was in the first main event against Damien Demento. Does anybody really remember Damien Demento outside of that and like his appearance in the Rumble, where he actually lasted about 18 to 19 minutes, but they didn't really do much because they were more focused on trying to get Giant Gonzalez over. That didn't fucking work at all. But Monday Night Raw was a big fucking deal. It wasn't the most revolutionary thing. It's not like live wrestling, live weekly wrestling rather, hadn't been done before. Memphis had done it, and a lot of studio wrestling had done it, but Memphis especially had been one of the pioneers of it because anything could happen in a live environment. Very few things can seem real in a taped environment, and that was the cool thing about Raw. And then they had to go to where they were taping, and they were taping things in increments. Sometimes they would tape 4 shows and build up to a pay-per-view. Sometimes they would tape stuff and they would realize that they got a pay-per-view coming up and they would have to shoot things and only the live audience saw, and then they would human centipede that stuff together. I guess I was going to find a way to work that in, but Raw was a big fucking deal. And Brett then beat Razor at the 93 Rumble. And on that same show, they really, just kicked off the remainder of they put the pedal to the metal with the remainder of the Flair Perfect feud. They had really just been hotshotted from Survivor Series 92 because Warrior left, or got fired because he was a fucking idiot. Along with Bulldog, let's be perfectly honest. But the next night, Flair lost to Perfect in a loser leaves, the company match. And basically what ended up happening, Flair went back to WCW. It would have been cool to see if Flair could have been on the Mania 9 card, because the fact that Flair was there for 18 months, roughly, and had 1 Mania match. I know it was because of timing and everything, but still, it's fucking ridiculous. But he goes back there. Jim Herd's gone. Jim Herd had been gone for about a year, just over a year before that. And he was doing what he was doing. WCW was not doing all that well by that point. WWE was having its own issues because they were still being very cartoonish with their presentation. And then we get to WrestleMania 9. Hooray! WrestleMania 9! God, that was really fucking bullshit. All they had to do was either have Brett leave as champion or Yokozuna leave as champion. The rest of the card is inconsequential, though. I will say Giant Gonzalez versus Undertaker is one of the worst matches of all time. It was a cool look, an outdoor venue. That was neat. That was a neat look, even though it was smaller compared to even WrestleMania 8. It was about on par seating capacity with WrestleMania 7. But, they're out. They got the pomp and circumstance, the Roman Coliseum theme. They got some good stuff here. But Hogan and Beefcake were in tag team action, not with each other. Taking another anything wrong with that, but it's like you always hear the stories about Hogan, then you think that maybe Hogan hated the brother's brother and hated a bunch of other stuff. Maybe he really was in that deleted scene the right gay guy for the job. Anybody remember that deleted thing? That deleted promo where Hogan got lost and called himself that? I don't know why that was so funny. It just was. They should have left it in. Why? Because it's hilarious. But anyway, they took on Money Inc. Hogan didn't want to be the tag team champion because that was beneath the Hulkster brother. And he had come back on a Raw just about a month before. No one cared. No one cared. They were meaner to Beefcake, don't get me wrong. They were way meaner to Beefcake. Beefcake was telling the story about the parasailing accident he had to cover on the face covering. And somebody actually yelled in the New York crowd. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. Oh, K yourself. That's basically what they said. I'm going to add it right there. And I'm like, I remember watching that as a kid and thinking, did they say that? Did they really fucking say that? My fucking goodness, that was ridiculous. So we get to WrestleMania 9. Yokozuna beats Brett. They had to cut it, basically due to, I think, pay-per-view time being cut, but also the fact that Yoko was gassed. And that also they were going to do something else. Brett got salt in the eyes, got pinned 1, 2, 3. Then Hogan comes out to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase. Oh, the Money in the Bank briefcase wasn't a thing yet. Hogan popularized it without even realizing it. He created it without even realizing it. Because Fuji says, my Yokozuna issues you a challenge. Do you accept? They tried the salt thing. Hogan ducks. Hogan knocks out Fuji. Hits the leg drop on Yokozuna. 1, 2, 3. And wins the championship. They neutralize Brett. They neutralize Yokozuna. And they set the company back for a fucking year. All because Vince McMahon couldn't see that Brett was the goddamn future. Now, sure, some fans pop, but here's the thing. By that point, people were sick of Hogan. He wasn't really fucking drawing. He might have been drawing a little bit in Europe, but he also faced off against a Great Muta and did a bunch of stuff, like, say, the WWF Championship's a trinket, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship is the real championship. Yeah, Hulk, sure, the IWGP Championship may be more prestigious. I mean, if you take a look at some of the champions, that is the case. But you're getting paid millions of dollars by Vince. Hogan wanted to leave, and he left. Meanwhile, Savage is a part-time wrestler, commentator. Roddy Piper, is not in the company. He's off doing some movies and off doing some stuff, and he would come back a little bit later. And Hogan leaves. Hogan gets out of his contract because he wants to go to Hollywood. Thunder in Paradise. Yeah, that didn't work out all that well. So, Vince McMahon had signed Lex Luger in the previous year. He had the World Bodybuilding Federation, which was not a good thing. World Bodybuilding Federation was a waste of fucking millions. And then Lex, and this was talked about in the biography. The biography that got me a lot more hate than I expected, even though I just stated my opinions. But the review, that is, Luger almost lost his arm, didn't because of Dr. James Andrews. Dun, dun, dun. In all seriousness, Dr. James Andrews is a tremendously well-revered physician. And what happens, his arm gets saved. He shows up as a narcissist, as Bobby Heenan said. I don't know why that always makes me laugh. And then I believe he beats Mr. Perfect at WrestleMania. And that wasn't all that great. And then he's having some matches on Raw. I do want to quickly mention, by the way, one great match on Raw. It doesn't get talked about. Or one great episode. May 17th, 1993. 1-2-3 Kid beats Razor Ramon. Big goddamn deal. Big pop. That launched Sean Waltman in WWF. And then Mario Jannetty beating Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship for 20 whole days. Because Marty was a naughty little individual that decided to get in trouble with the law multiple times. Wouldn't be the last time either, because he just couldn't keep his goddamn head straight. But those were some big deals. Dwight the Clown, also, the initial Dwight the Clown was great on Raw. There were some great moments, actually, despite the fact Rob fucking Bartlett was there. He terrible commentator. Fucking abysmal. The cartoonish nature of Raw was starting to wear thin with people because they were in a primetime slot. But, back to Lex Luger. He was the narcissist, as Bobby... I just can't help it. Bobby Heenan's fucking hilarious. I miss Bobby Heenan. And we now have Lex Luger suddenly showing up while they're on the USS Intrepid, and people are trying to body slam Yokozuna. Because Yokozuna, by this point, at King of the Ring 1993, had beaten Hulk Hogan because of a camera flash, and he got burned and everything, and he got beat. I think Harvey Whippleman was the cameraman, I believe. Hogan loses, he leaves, he works some house shows on the European tour, and then that's it. And on that same night, Bret Hart has 3 completely different matches against Mr. Perfect, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Razor Ramon. I believe if you have to strike that, reverse it, I think he beat Bam Bam in the finals. But he's the king of the ring. And then Jerry Lawler, you should see him with a crown, because you can't keep him near the school in town. And if you get it, then it's all right. All right. And then you're going to get a Billie Eilish reference here. But that feud was going on. And back to Lex Luger, finally. He shows up in a patriotic t-shirt. USA, 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 USA. He shows up and he's Mr. USA, made in the USA, Lex Luger. I talked about this in the documentary, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but Vince McMahon said he's going to be my next Hulk Hogan. They do the Lex Express. He doesn't win the title at SummerSlam 1993. Good fucking job there, Vince. If he had just given it to Lex at that point, I don't know if Lex necessarily would have succeeded as champion, but let's be perfectly honest. Prolonging the chase was a mistake. It made Lex look ridiculous because he wouldn't have been able to challenge for the title until he won the Rumble, by the way. So I can see where Vince was thinking that, but they made Vince look so... well, Vince made himself look stupid, made Luger look even dumber, because they're dropping the balloons, the confetti, and everything, and they're da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, USA, USA, USA. Waving the flags around, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, patriotic, ha-ha-ha. Red, white, and blue balls, because they didn't get the finish that they wanted. Oh, it was fucking hilarious. You know why it was fucking hilarious? Because Lex Luger went into a feud with Ludwig Borga, a man that had a swastika on his goddamn ankle, or somewhere on his body. I'm not surprised. Read up about the guy. He wasn't necessarily the best individual. But nevertheless, Lex Luger fails as Mr. USA. Even though he still got cheers, we then go to 1994, the Rumble 1994. Lex and Brett are the co-winners. This is right after Brett is selling his knee because Owen got upset at Brett during that match with the Quebecers and kicked his leg out of his leg. I can't help but remember that. Brett and Lex are the co-winners. And they do this thing where the winner is Lex Luger. They play his music and nobody cared. Nobody cared. There were boos. The crowd said bullshit. They played Brett's music and Brett got the cheers. They go to WrestleMania 10, seismic shift that should have happened at the previous WrestleMania. Luger faces off against Yoko. That transitions into a feud with Mr. Perfect because he was the referee. And then Yokozuna loses to Brett after Brett had lost to Owen, which kicks off another fucking program. And Bret Hart is a champion. Everybody's celebrating. Even Lex, even though he's looking like this, and Owen's like, you son of a bitch, you fucking beat me. I beat you and you still beat me. So, getting back to Vince. Mania 10, looking pretty good. They were back in Madison Square Garden. Things were a little bit back on track. 1994 was a little bit better. But then, WCW decides to start signing stars. They signed Hogan. Hogan had not been under contract for a while, been doing Thunder in Paradise. Ric Flair was a big reason why he got signed. So, it hurt Vince because Hogan was not going to draw in WWF. He didn't need to be there anymore. But him going to WCW, even though things got dicey very quickly, initially, big fucking boost. Bash at the Beach 1994, Vince was like, oh boy, this isn't good. They signed Hogan. They signed Savage a little bit later in like November, December of 1994 because Vince didn't want to let Randy be a wrestler. Said, we're going with youth. Even though, I mean, sure, Randy probably should have just been a part-timer at that point, but give him more meaningful feuds. Randy wanted to stay. Vince said, nah, I want you to be a commentator, and Randy had more to offer. And boy, did he ever, because he had a couple championship runs that always got interrupted by Hulk Hogan. And he had that legendary feud in 1997 that helped launch DDP into the stratosphere. So, I like being Trish's stratosphere. Who wouldn't? Anyway, enough of that. Duggan and so many others leave. Many others start to leave. I mean, that was 1994. WCW was gaining steam. They were still lagging behind, but they were gaining steam. 1995. I mean, and there's other shit going on. We could talk about we could talk again about the Jerry Lawler Survivor Series 1993 exclusion because of what may or may not have happened. Who knows? We all know Lawler likes them young, so I wouldn't be too surprised if there was an element of truth. But by the time 1994 is rolling to a close, Bob Backlund had beaten Bret Hart at Survivor Series 1994. That's your son, Owen's saying. Throw in the towel, Mom. And Helen did that, and Stu's like, I love Stu Hart, but Stu looked very lost on camera at that point. I mean, then again, he was like about 80. So, what happens is Bob Backlund wins the championship, loses to Diesel, a.k.a. Kevin Nash, who had come into the company about a year and a half before. And Vince McMahon makes a big guy the champion and then changes everything about him, and no wonder Diesel's reign flopped. If Diesel had been the ass kicker that he had been promoted as for a while when he got really over at the 94 Rumble, eliminating 7 people, getting loud Diesel chants, that would have been something. But Vince McMahon decided to make a bunch of dumb decisions, and we had the steroid trial that ended up being basically nothing. Jerry McDevitt said, I'm going to eat you alive. And he did. And it was disgusting. It was hard to clean up all the bones and human flesh. It's like a game of human flesh. Wait, that was a different line from Larry Zbyszko. The steroid trial basically does damage the company. They have a working relationship with Smoky Mountain Wrestling at this point. Jim Cornette's running that along with Rick Rubin funding it. And they're doing well. But by 1995, everything was down. They were Southern Regional Territory, by the way. It would take a while to go through Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And, like, Kane would show up, or not Kane, but Undertaker would show up to face the future Kane, Unabomber, a.k.a. Glenn Jacobs, a.k.a. a guy that was the big red monster in the ring and an even bigger monster outside the ring. If you know, you know. Also, Shawn Michaels faced off against Buddy Landel when Buddy Landel was doing a redemption angle, and there were others, too. And other Smoky Mountain talents, D'Lo Brown and a few others, got eventually signed by WWE. Hell, Kane, as Unabomber, got signed as Dr. Isaac Yankem, an evil dentist, because Vince McMahon will get these fucking ideas in his head, and I wonder why he lost $6 million in 1995. Things were getting better by later 1995 because things were getting back on track as far as action. But boy, the Rumble 95 60 minute intervals. God, we'd be here all day. 60-second intervals. It wasn't very good. Shawn Michaels won the Rumble from, the number one position. He was only in there for 40 fucking minutes. I'm not saying it wasn't an endurance test, but let's not act like it was even, like 90 seconds. Let's not act like it was that. Let's definitely not act like it was 2 fucking minutes per, between people. What ends up happening is, the Mania 11 doesn't go all that well, and then we go to Survivor Series 95. Bret beats Diesel. The Clique was formed by this point because Triple H had come in, and Waltman was part of it as well. So it was Hall, Nash, Shawn, Triple H, Waltman, aka 1-2-3 Kid. They were doing some good stuff. Shawn was starting to pitch fits and get injuries because he got beat up by a bunch of Marines. It was one because Shawn was drunk, pilled out, and decided to pick or hit on the guy's girlfriend. And you never really want to pick on a Marine. But during this time, September 4th, 1995, WCW launches Nitro. This is a big fucking deal because they're going head to head with WWE. And Nitro was live. Raw was live at times, but generally taped. Because Vince McMahon didn't have the resources he claims. He had the resources. He just didn't want to spend that much money to do live TV. And he's like, oh, WCW won't be able to compete. And to be perfectly honest, even as somebody that was a fan of both companies at the time, I was thinking it's stupid for WCW to do this. Yeah, they have some guys I like, but I go, they can't beat Vince. I was wrong. And that'll be discussed in future installments as well, because it was a big fucking deal. They went head to head with them, and it was close for a while. Ratings, victories, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And as we get into 1996, WWF is still rolling, or starting to roll. The 96 Rumble, to me, is a little bit... It does show the talent depth issues because they bring some people in. I think they brought in Doug Gilbert, and Doug Gilbert got dumped out on his goddamn head by Vader, which was hilarious. But the 96 Rumble, Shawn Michaels wins 2 in a row. Okay, cool. Big deal. I mean, he's first since Hulk Hogan to do that. And Shawn was going to face off against Bret, who had beaten Diesel at Survivor Series 1995. Had a great blood match, or, bloody match that got unintentional blood. It was In Your House 1995. Things were cooking. We go into Mania 12, and the Iron Man match, that was a big deal. Shawn Michaels winning, and then them building the tension for a future rematch. Bret went away, filmed Lonesome Dove, and took some time off due to injuries because he'd been working hard and hard and hard for years and years and years, not just in WWF, but he'd been working hard since, 78, I think he debuted as a wrestler, so he was tired, and he deserved the rest, especially after being a great champion for Vince on multiple occasions. So, Shawn's a champion, and then they do the curtain call thing that Vince allowed, but didn't realize, oh shit, people are going to see this, pal. Ha ha ha. And that's what ended up happening. They ended up doing some stuff that would lead to, a seismic shift in the company, so to speak, because Hall and Nash were leaving. Hall made a deal, and then Nash made a deal. They wanted more money, and I don't blame them. Turner was handing out guaranteed contracts, and Vince didn't want to do that. Even though he could have, he didn't want to. Basically, Hall and Nash leave. The curtain call, Sean Waltman wasn't there because he was in rehab, I believe. So, Shawn was the champion. It fell on Triple H. King of the Ring 1996, gone. Shawn's the champion. And Vince McMahon is starting to get his fucking goddamn ass kicked. He's starting to get his ass kicked by putting up with all of Shawn's shit, who wasn't drawing as champion. He was popular. There were some big crowds, but he wasn't drawing as champion. And Vince McMahon, after June 10th, 1996, that was the last time that Raw beat Nitro in the ratings. And then Hall and Nash had shown up. Well, Hall showed up May 20th, 1996. And then Diesel showed up a little bit later. And then they powerbombed Bischoff at Great American Bash 1996. They had to come up with the whole thing where, no, we don't work for the WWF. They powerbomb Bischoff. That kicks it off. And then they start pummeling them into the dirt. Bash at the Beach 1996. Hulk Hogan turns heel. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, you people wouldn't be here. He was telling us how he felt all that time ago, and we didn't want to fucking hear it. If you know, you know. But Vince McMahon was struggling. He had brought back Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 12. That had flamed out by the point, in question at Bash at the Beach 1996. And boy, things were just looking really dire because Vince McMahon had gotten cocky and Turner spent a whole lot of money. And also they had a better talent roster. And then he would be resistant to bring in Austin and Foley, but give Mark Merrow a guaranteed contract of like $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Nothing against Mark Merrow, but that will be discussed in part 4. When is part 4 going to happen? Who goddamn knows? Because I got a lot on my plate here. It's very difficult. In fact, I probably should eat that food before it rots. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.